You know how some people say, oh, I feel like $1 million? No, right now, I feel like £1,000,000. I just crushed a massive plate of beef brisket to the point where now my brain's just not even wanting to function. Oh, crud! So today, we're talking about probably one of the most pivotal vehicles in all of import, especially Japanese cars, okay? Without this car, there would not be much of a Japanese car scene in the United States. So, let's get down to it. The truths and reality about Datsun. Some of you who are new to the car scene or just don't read much probably don't even know what brand I'm talking about unless you're a big Nissan guy, okay? Or you just, there are people out there that know about Datsun, obviously, especially if you live in older parts of the country where the cars are still in pretty much good shape. But a lot of times Datsun models are very hard to find because later in life Datsun was reabsorbed into Nissan. That is a fact. After World War II, let's talk a little history here. After World War II, Japan's economy kind of went down. It didn't collapse necessarily, but because of the new political system that was in place and all the fun things with that goes on, the yen was not worth as much, and therefore there weren't as many rich people. And that, and on top of this, Japan's, I guess you could say, population base was not just in Japan anymore. It was spread across all over Oceania, the South Pacific, and then that all fled to places like Peru, Chile, like basically South America, because it was more affordable for them to go there. And on top of this, they weren't necessarily considered war criminals if they went to those countries, because then they didn't care. So, all that to say, there weren't a lot of people that had a lot of wealth in Japan. And at the time, cars were considered you had money to have a car kind of thing. Well, Nissan tried to change that, and they started manufacturing vehicles. As time moved forward, they continued to make cars, but they really needed to expand their horizons. If they wanted to make more money, more capital gains, they needed to expand into new territories, i.e. the Western Hemisphere. They needed to expand to the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and really start expanding their operations, but also giving their operations a chance to really grow, blossom, and create new car communities. Because at the time, that really didn't exist for Japanese cars. They were very functional. They were very, mechanically inclined. Like, basically, you had a vehicle if you were a utilitarian or a rich person. That was it. And if you're a rich person, you weren't buying a Japanese car. You were buying a European imported car or a car from the United States, because GIs would bring them over and then they couldn't necessarily get them home or whatever the case might be. But they were buying imports before they bought their own cars from inside their own country, their own domestic vehicles. So they started to change the way they approach cars. They stopped making them utilitarian. They still made utilitarian cars, okay? I mean, look at a Isuzu, case in point. But their approach now was, let's try and make something that would appeal to the American markets. A market that really hasn't been touched much other than by American motors and extremely expensive luxury vehicles from places like England. You had the Aston Martins coming out, Jaguars, things like that. They were competing with all of that. So, Japanese underdog enters the ring, and Nissan sends over one of their people, I can't remember his name to save my life, and I'm just bad with names in general, but they send over one of their people to try and start building sales in the United States. Well, in case of failure, they named the brand Datsun. They didn't even want to call themselves Nissan, because if they failed, that would be a shame on them, and they didn't want that to mar their, really good name. That said, Datsun was born. Datsun came out with a few models. The Datsun Sunny. It was a truck. I can't remember their other names. But really, the biggest problem they had is they didn't appeal to Americans much. They were small, compact. They were really hard to get into if you were above 5'5". So, American cars at the time were much bigger, louder, more powerful. Japanese cars were economic. They were not very cool looking, and they didn't really have much of a range to them because they didn't have as big a gas tank. Okay, Datsun, you need to come up with a solution. Datsun's answer: we got you covered. In 1969, they came up with a prototype car known as the Datsun 240Z, otherwise known to the rest of the world as the Fair Lady Z from Nissan. This car, with their L24 engine, changed the face of basically sports cars. This was the first sports car that really took off with Americans because it had some of the looks and features of your, American cars, as well as the European imported cars. It had the nice long nose, the round bulb lights that were really popular at the time. They had that sleek, almost Daytona-esque style to the back of the car. It was light, it was nimble. That thing could turn on a dime. There was a lot going for it. Engineering-wise, it was pretty ahead of its time, in my opinion, for the time that it was made. That said, moving forward, this car took off like a rocket ship. Slow in the beginning, but all of a sudden, sales went up. It came to a point where literally they would have to be importing the car in waves of colors. You couldn't even order the car in a color because it would sell out like that. People were snapping them up. Why? Well, A, it was fun to drive. It was good to look at. And on top of this, it was economically smart because at the time it came out, and oil prices had began. Oil began to cost a lot of money at the time, for the time. The whole inflation thing. So, when you put all that in perspective, this car was really the best option. And it was cheap. So much cheaper than the cars around it. All the more fuel-efficient cars for the time cost a very pretty penny and had to be imported from outside the United States. Inside the States, you had the Datsun car club going on, and they were taking the world by storm. The 240Z saved Japanese imports. It really saved Japanese sports cars for that matter as well, because it was one of the first ones that really took off with a foreign market. And if anyone knows anything about taking off with foreign markets, really, your business doesn't do well until it does go to another market as well, not just the current market that it sits in. So, that's just how capitalist expansion works. You have to get your product outside of where it lives to really start to take off on a global scale. Look at what Fender did. They created Fender Japan, and now Fender guitars are worldwide known as some of the best guitars you could buy. Just an example, because I do build and work on guitars as a hobby. And I'm trying to make my own brand. I'll keep you posted on that. But back to the 240Z. That car revolutionized the way Japanese cars were viewed in the eyes of Americans and honestly the rest of the world, because when the rest of the world got it, like, wow, this is actually a brilliant product. We really need to work on this. And the L24 engine that is at its heart is what really helped push Japanese cars forward. Nissan had a gem with that thing, man. I mean, the stuff that it could put out was incredible. If I could put one of those inside of this Honda, much as I love my Honda engine with its high compression motor and all that, I think I would still have to go with that L24. Or for me, an L28 so I can get fuel injection. But yeah, all that's to say, in my opinion, I feel like the Datsun 240Z is really what helped save Japanese import cars in the United States. Without it, you wouldn't have the sales that we saw, and you wouldn't have the Z car in general. The Z car is really one of the most iconic tuner type cars from Japan that people, the average Joe on the block, would recognize. Just because you go outside of it, and maybe, yeah, you'll see Corollas, you'll see Hondas, but then when you see a Z roll by, people are like, oh, look at that it's an eye turner, and especially with the 350Z revitalizing it and the 370Z after it, both cars really kind of capture a modern view of what its ancestor, the 240Z, had in mind. And it's still one of my favorite cars to this day. I had the opportunity to get one at one point in time, but life happened and I wouldn't be able to house it. So until I get a new place, Rhonda is going to be the whip. If I can get a new place with a garage where I can store the car and build it up and really kind of take you all through that process, which that would be a great series once that happens. So that's what I think helps save Japanese cars in the United States. If you have another opinion about this, leave it in the comment section below. I would love to see what people come up with for cars that they feel help save the Japanese car scene in the States. Again, this is just my opinion, and those were facts, by the way, in the beginning. I don't necessarily have a source for them, but you can look this stuff up. It is readily available out there and online. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed and found this fun and informative. Just another cool look at cars in the United States, but really Japanese cars, which is my personal favorite. I love Japanese auto scene. Some of the coolest cars come out of it. Some of the most tuned up cars come out of it. So yeah, anyhow, God bless you guys. Hope you all enjoy. Like and subscribe for more content, and we will see you people later. Oh no!